ओम श्री गुरुभ्यो नमः हरि ओम सदाशिवसमारंभां शंकराचार्यमध्यमाम् अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्तां वन्दे गुरुपरम्परां श्रुतिस्मृतिपुराणानामालयं करुणालयं नमामि भगवत्पादशङ्करं लोकशङ्करं सदात्मध्याननिरतं विषयेभ्यः पराङ्मुखं नौमि शास्त्रेषु निष्णातं चन्द्रशेखरभारतीम् ओम Page number 11, top verse number 14. अधिकारिणमाशास्ते फलसिद्धिर्विशेषतः उपाया देशकालाद्याः सन्त्यस्यां सहकारिणः. So last week we had looked at this verse and the introductory line to this verse, the commentary by Jagadguru Srimad Chandrashekhara Bhagavatpada Mahaswamigal, where he had said tattat karmani samarthasyaiva tattat karma phala bhoktritva sambhavat असमर्थस्य तदयोगात् बाह्यदेशकालादेः सहकारित्वमात्रम् आन्तरसामर्थ्यस्यैव फलदायकत्वम् इत्याह अधिकारणमिति. So essentially this verse, Adi Shankara Bhagavatpada had said that the achievement of a particular result from any activity, be it karma or be it the jnana sadhana, it really depends upon the qualifications that are present, the sadhana chatushtaya sampatti that is present in the adhikari or the student. The factors such as desha, kala, space, time, the appropriate place, the appropriate time for doing jnana sadhana, etc., are sahakari factors or supporting factors for the achievement of the result. But the main factor that determines whether the result is achieved or not is really the qualifications of the student. The student himself, how prepared he is, will determine whether he is going to be successful. He or she is going to be successful. And the appropriate time, the appropriate place, the right guru, etc., are supporting factors. But the real driver, or what differentiates success in one case and failure in another case, is the student himself. And that was what Jagadguru Srimad Chandrashekhara Bhagavatpada Mahaswamigal had said, Bahya Deshakaladehe Sahakaritva Matram Antara Samarthyasaiva Phaladayakatvam ityaha. The internal capability of that student is what determines the result. Phaladayakatvam ityaha adhikarinam iti. Now let us continue. Karmanam tavate drishtartatvat यदाहवनीये जुहोति अश्वस्य पदे जुहोति प्राचीनप्रवणे वैश्वदेवेन यजत सायं जुहोति प्रातर्जुहोति वसन्ते वसन्ते ज्योतिषा यजेत वसन्ते ब्राह्मणो अग्निनादधीत इत्यादि शास्त्र अनुसारेण देशकालयोः अपि असाधारणकारणत्वम् अङ्गीकर्तव्यम्. So here Parameshti Mahasannidhanam Jagadguru Srimad Chandrashekhara Bhagavatpada Mahaswamigal is quoting various Shruti statements which appear to give the impression that the results of various Vedic karma is really dependent upon the time and the space, that Desha and Kala play a central role and not merely supporting factors. So he is presenting the prima facie view which is held by the Purva Pakshi, the opponent. The opponent says, no, this is not a case that Desha and Kala are Sahakari, that the results are highly dependent on the time and space also. And you cannot simply say that it is Sahakari Karanam and not a Mukhya Karanam. So there are various Vedic statements, like for example, there are statements saying that this particular oblation has to be made in the Ahvaniya fire only. So Yadahavaniye Juhoti, that is like a Vidhi. The Vidhi says you have to place the offering in the Ahvaniya fire. If you do in the Garhapatya fire or the Dakshinagni, you are not going to get the result. So the Desha or the right place for the oblation is important. So that is one quotation. And then in the Ashwamedha Prakaranam, there is one Vidhi saying that Ashwasya Pade Juhoti. So one essentially performs an oblation or offers an oblation where the horse has placed its feet, in the sense that not that the horse is still standing there, but after it has gone at the place where the horse has stood, at that place you construct an altar and then you offer the offering in that place. So again, place is important. Then in terms of directions, dik, he says Prachina Pravane Vaishwadevena Yajeta. So the Vaishwadeva sacrifice has to be made facing the east. So you cannot like face some other direction and make the offering in the Vaishwadeva. And then in the Agnihotra sacrifice, it says Sayam Juhoti, Pratar Juhoti. The Agnihotra offering, oblation, must be offered at sunset and at dawn. Then the Jyotishtoma sacrifice, Vasante Vasante Jyotisha Yajeta, that every spring that Jyotishtoma has to be done. So you cannot do that in winter or summertime, etc. It has to be done in the springtime. Similarly, Vasante Brahmano Agni Nadadhita. So what this vidhi is saying is that the ritual of bringing the fire, taking up the fire, must be performed in the springtime. So all these are different examples of how time and space are critical, central factors for the achievement of various results. So this is apparently presenting the view that location and time is necessary for the particular action to bear fruit. And this is the point of view of the Purvapakshi or the opponent. So the Purvapaksha view is stated, Ityadi Shastranusarena Deshakalayoho api Asadharana Karanatvam Angikartavyam. The extraordinary or the special central Karanatvam or causation of time and space in the achievement of results must be accepted. This is what the Purvapakshi is saying. Continuing, यद्यपि ज्ञानस्यापि यथादर्शे तथात्मनि यथा स्वप्ने तथा पितृलोके यथाप्सु परीव ददृशे तथा गन्धर्वलोके छायातपयोरिव ब्रह्मलोके इह चेत् अवेदीत् अथ सत्यमस्ति न चेद् इह अवेदीत् महती विनष्टिः इत्यादि श्रुत्यनुसारेण मनुष्यलोकब्रह्मलोकयोरेव ज्ञानभूमित्वं प्रतीयते. Here the Purvapaksha view is being continued, where the opponent is saying not just the case of karma, rituals, but also in jnana, the same principle applies, that time and space cannot be dismissed as merely incidental factors or supporting factors. There is a primary causation associated with them. And so he is quoting the Kathopanishad and the Kenopanishad in support. So the Kathopanishad mantra, Kathopanishad 2.3.5, यथादर्शे तथात्मनि यथा स्वप्ने तथा पितृलोके यथाप्सु परीव ददृशे तथा गंधर्वलोके छाया तपयोरेव ब्रह्मलोके. So here Yamadharmaraja is telling Nachiketas that both the human world, Manushya and the Brahmaloka are very, very favorable for Brahmagyana. The Gandharvaloka and the Pitruloka, Brahmagyana is possible, but it is a little more difficult. So Yamadharmaraja gives 4 examples for each of these lokas. And for example, for the Manushya he says, Yathadarshe Tathatmani, meaning just like one sees one's face in the mirror, one can clearly understand or know the self in the human world, Manushya just as clearly as one sees one's face in the mirror. So, the possibility of a clear understanding of the self is possible as the human being. Then, as far as the Pitruloka or the Loka of the Pitras, the forefathers, he says Yatha Swapne Tatha Pitruloke. So, the dream, we are not very clear about the dream. So, we see many things, but that perception is a slightly dim or a fuzzy perception. So, similarly, in the Pitruloka also, one can get the knowledge of the self, but it will be it won't be a very clear knowledge. It will not be as clear as the Manushya Loka. So, it is like the perception of a dream in the Pitruloka. Now, in the case of the Gandhara Loka or the Loka of the Gandharvas, the example given is Yathapsu Pari Iva Dadrishe. That is just like one sees one's own face in the waters of a river. So there are lots of ripples, etc., in the river surface, and therefore the reflection also wavers. Now, if the waters there are lots of waves, etc., that someone throws a stone in the river surface is disturbed, and therefore the reflection also is disturbed as a result. Now, similarly, in the Gandharva Loka, one is able to see the self, but there are lots of other distractions and disturbances there, and therefore that perception, that clarity that one gets in the Manushya Loka, one does not have there. Now, in the case of Brahmaloka or the Loka of Chaturmukha Brahma or Hiranyagarbha, that is Brahmaji, not Brahman, Brahmaji, that Brahmaloka, one gets a very, very clear knowledge. One is able to distinguish the self from the non self, like Chaya and Atapayoho. That is just like um, shade and light, one is able to distinguish shade from light very, very clearly. Shadow and light are extremely opposite. Similarly, one is able to get a very clear and distinct knowledge of the self in Brahmaloka. Now, the the quality or the clarity of knowledge of the self is being described in these four lokas. And so, what the Purva is saying, just like in the Kathopanishad, that it is said that Manushya Loka and the Brahmaloka are the apt places for knowledge, it follows that location is a very important factor here. It cannot be said to be a supporting factor. A similar idea is conveyed in the Kenopanishad mantra 2.5. Iha ched avedit atha satyamasti na ched iha avedit mahati vanashtihi bhuteshu bhuteshu vichitya dhiraha pretyasman lokha namrata bhavanti. So the first line of this mantra is being quoted by Jagadguru Srimad Chandrashekhara Bhagavatpada Mahaswamigal, wherein it is said, Iha ched avedit. If the knowledge of the self is gained in this birth, here, Iha means here. Avedit means if this is known in this, if the self is known in this birth, Hatha Satyamasti. The birth becomes fruitful and valid. One becomes a Kritakritya, one has achieved what the purpose of life is if one has attained the knowledge of the self in this birth. Nachediha avedit. If a person doesn't use this human birth properly to gain this knowledge, mahati vinashti. The loss is infinite. It's a great loss. The same idea was also conveyed in the previous verses of the Vivekachudamani that we saw, verses 4 and 5. Labdhva katanchid narajanma durlabham tatrapi pumstvam shrudipara darshanam yasvatma muktyai na yateta mudhazihi sa atmaha swam vinahanti asadgrahat. And in the fifth shloka, itah konvasti mudhatma yastu swarthe pramadyati durlabham manusham deham prapya tatrapi paurusham. So, if one has somehow attained this human birth and wastes it and does not gain the knowledge of the self, it is a great loss. It is simply unforgivable, says the Upanishad and Adi Shankara Bhagavatpada also. So the Purva Pakshi is asking, with all these Shruti, Shloka, quotations, etc., all of this is proving that not just karma, even jnana is highly dependent on the time and the place. So where one gains this knowledge and at what time one gains this knowledge is also very, very crucial. And therefore, one cannot simply say that time and space are incidental factors and not primary factors. So Parameshti Mahasannidhanam continues. He says, Evam ऋणत्रयम् अपाकृत्य मनोमोक्षे निवेशयेत् अनपाकृत्य मोक्षं तु सेवमानो व्रजति अधः ब्रह्मचर्यं समाप्य गृही भवेत् गृहात् वनी भूत्वा प्रव्रजेत् इत्यादि प्रमाणानुसारेण ब्रह्मज्ञानान्तरङ्गभूत संन्यासस्यापि कालो विधीयते इव प्रतिभाति. So here the Jabala Upanishad is quoted wherein it is said that the person who is about to enter Jnana Marga must do so only after having discharged the rinam, the debt that he has incurred to three classes of people. One is to the rishis, and that rishi rinam has, or the debt that one owes to the rishis or the sages, one is able to discharge by doing shastra adhyanam, Veda adhyanam, and adhyapanam. So he has to properly study the Vedas. He has to memorize them. He has to teach them to the next generation. So one discharges one's obligations to the rishis through the performance of adhyanam and adhyapanam. One discharges the duty to the pitris or the ancestors by getting a progeny. So that and by performing Shraddha karma, etc. So one has to perform all the Pitra karmas, one has to get progeny so that their descendants or that line, it does not end with one. So by begetting progeny, by raising them, and by performing the Shraddha karma, one discharges the debts to the Pitras or the ancestors, and then one discharges Devaranam or to the Devatas, by performing various sacrifices, by various Devata karma. And thus, it is only an individual who has discharged his debts to the rishis, to the pitras, and to the devatas. Only such an individual is qualified to enter the Jnana Marga. So, therefore, the time as a factor and the qualifications, meaning completion of or the discharge of all these debts, is a crucial factor, says the Jabala Upanishad. And then it goes on to say, Anapakritya moksham tu sevamano vrjatyadha. That is, if one attempts moksha or liberation through the Jnana Marga without having discharged his duties, then one is bound to suffer a fall. So that stated aim may not be achieved. In fact, one may fall behind and suffer a loss because he has attempted moksha without having discharged these duties. So that is what the Java Upanishad is saying. And later it says, Brahmacharyam samapya grihi bhavet gruhat vani bhutva pravraje. That is, one takes up sannyasashrama not directly, but one goes from brahmacharya to grihasthashrama. Brahmacharyam samapya grihi bhavet gruhat vani bhutva pravraje. So once one has done grihasthashrama, then one is qualified to do vanaprastha, and after vanaprastha one can take up sannyasashrama. So there also the qualification for sannyasa is that one has undergone the various ashramas previously. So that's what is Acharya is saying. Ityadi pramananusarena brahmajnana antaranga bhuta sannyasasyapi kalo vidhiyate iva pratibhati. So the iva is the $1,000,000 iva. So he says it appears as though that sannyasashrama, which is the antaranga sadhana or the internal sadhana for jnana, that is the one that is closest to jnana, is sannyasashrama. So if you think of jnana and moksha as various concentric circles, so the inner circle is moksha. To attain that in moksha, the circle outside is jnana. So jnana is the circle after moksha, the next concentric circle. And the one which is the next concentric circle after jnana is sannyasa or renunciation. So here it appears as though the Upanishad is saying that if you want to take up sannyasa ashrama, you have to go from brahmacharya to grihasthashrama, from grihasthashrama to vanaprastha, from vanaprastha one has to go to sannyasa ashrama. So all these pramanas seem to indicate that the path to moksha, the qualifications for moksha are dependent very much on the time, space, ashrama, etc. Not just the qualifications of sadhana chatushtaya sampatti, but all these other factors also are apparently necessary. That's what Jagadguru Srimad Chandrashekhara Bharati Mahaswamigal is saying. Now, then he presents the Siddhanta view. He says, Athapi Ashuddha Chitto Rakshasarajo Virochanaha Brahmalokam Gatopi Parama Guruna Parameshthina Upadishtopi Naiva Agrahid Atmanam. So, here he is talking about the story that occurs in the 8th chapter of the Chandogya Upanishad, wherein Indra, the king of the Devatas, and Virochana, the king of the Asuras, both of them approach Brahma, Chaturmukha Brahma, Hiranyagarbha, to teach them about Atma. So they both approach the Guru for Atma Jnana. So here Brahma does not directly give them Atma Vidya. He first says, okay, first you have to serve as brahmacharis in the Gurukula for 32 years. So you stay in Brahmaloka itself and do Guru Seva for 32 years. After that, I will teach you about Atma Vidya. So, the two natural enemies, Indra and Virochana, one is the leader of the Asuras, one is the leader of the Devatas. Both of them, as students, become friends and they stay in Brahmaloka for 32 years serving the Guru. So, after 32 long years are completed, then he asks, okay, why have you come here? So, after 32 years, he's asking, okay, you have served me for 32 years. Now tell me, what is the purpose of you trying to meet me? Tell me what it is about. And then they say, actually, sir, we would like you to teach us about Atma, give us Atma Vijnana. To which Prajapati says, okay, fine. He takes a vessel with water and he says, okay, what do you see in that water? They say, I can see the body from top to toe. Then he says, okay, now go decorate yourself properly, wear nice clothes, wear jewelry, wear your crown, etc. Then come back and look at the reflection in the water and tell me what you see. Now, they both say we see the body, it looks very nice, it's been decorated very well, it looks beautiful. Now, Brahma's intention was to demonstrate that the body cannot be the Atma because it changes so much. So, if you decorate the body, it changes, the reflection changes, the body changes because of the association with things like clothes, perfume, etc. etc. So, therefore, the body itself cannot be the Atma. That was his intention. But Indra and Virochana both mistake the teaching and say, Brahma is telling us that the reflection, what is seen, represents the Atma. And therefore, both Indra and Virochana mistake the teaching to be that the body is the Atma. Both of them mistake that. And then what happens? That both of them leave Brahmaloka. Now, Brahma doesn't stop them because this is a very crucial lesson for all of us. It's a management lesson that if somebody is making a mistake, and especially if there are people in great positions of authority who have an inflated sense of their own worth, it is not correct to immediately tell them, no, you're wrong. That will hurt them. Even if they don't have an inflated sense of self-worth, if someone is coming as a student to a guru, one should not say, no, you're completely wrong. If you say that, it will hurt the ego of the student and they will no longer be ready to listen to the teaching of the guru. Therefore, the lesson that is embedded in here for a guru is that one has to go the path of the student, let him go in his path, and then slowly course correct him. You cannot immediately say, you are wrong, I am correct, listen to me. If you do that, they will not listen. In fact, they will think that the guru is being very, very arrogant and egotistical and will completely miss the teaching. So, the purpose of them coming to the guru and learning would have suffered. So anyway, coming back to the story, what happens here is that both Indra and Virochana get the wrong message from Brahma. They misunderstand what is being conveyed and they go away. Now what happens is that Virochana continues on his journey and he goes back to Asura kingdom and then he teaches all the Asuras wrong things. He teaches everybody that the body is the self and that becomes the Charvaka Matam, the philosophy of the materialists, who essentially modern day materialists, who say that whatever is the physical body that has to be preserved, you have to decorate it well, you have to give it all sorts of importance. The only thing which is acceptable to us is pratyaksha pramana or perception, and the body is the only thing that I can see. Therefore, the self is nothing but the body itself. So that is the view of the materialists. The origins of that are from Virochana, from the leader of the Asuras. Now Indra, on his way, he says, "No, this cannot. There's something not correct about this teaching. I have misunderstood." Because when they are both going, Brahma says the nature of the self is that it is free from hunger and thirst, etc. He makes an announcement again. Now, when Indra hears the announcement made by Brahma, both of them hear it. Virochana and Indra hear it. But Virochana is convinced that he has understood and he keeps going, ignoring the teacher's warning. Indra recognizes that Brahma is warning them that they have misunderstood. So he comes back to Brahmaloka and then gets the teaching from Brahma. But again, not immediately. It goes through several iterations until he has landed on the right teaching of Atma. So, Acharya Jagadguru Srimad Chandrashekhara Bharati Mahaswamigal is quoting that example to say that Virochana, who was the leader of the Asuras, despite the fact that he was in Brahmaloka, has misunderstood it. So, what does that tell us? It tells us that while Brahmaloka and Manushaloka are highly conducive, they are not necessary factors. You cannot say that that is absolutely necessary for us one to gain jnana. It only means that they are conducive factors or supportive factors. So that is the point that Parameshti Mahasamvedhanam is making. So he is saying Ashuddha Chitto Rakshasarajo Virochana, the king of the Rakshasas, Virochana, because his mind was impure, Ashuddha Chittaha, Brahmalokam Gatopi, even though he went to Brahmaloka, Paramaguruna Parameshthina Upadishtopi, even though he was taught by the best of the teachers, Prajapati, Brahma himself, Naiva Agrahid Atmanam, he did not get Atmagyana, whereas another student, Indra, his co-student who went to the same guru at the same time, he eventually got Atmagyana. Why is that? Because Indra had Shuddha Chittam, whereas Virochana had Ashuddha Chittam. So that is the distinguishing feature between those two. With that, we will pause today's session and we will take up the rest of the commentary in the next session. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate Om Shanti Shanti Shanti